And it has nothing to do with luck. It has to do with us communicating every step of the way, whether we're changing, whether we're growing, articulating that, giving each other space to be honest, and then coming up with a game plan together to move forward together.
Welcome to the Excellence Project. In today's episode, you're going to hear a 4-way conversation with Marina, myself, and Tom and Lisa Bilyeu. If you don't know who they are, they're the co-founders of the $1 Billion Quest business, and they're also hosts of Impact Theory and Women of Impact, one of the most popular podcasts in business. They're some of the smartest people I know in branding, in business, in relationships, in global trends, and we talk about all of that. I think you're going to love it. So with no further ado, let's jump into our 4-way conversation with Tom and Lisa Bilyeu. Enjoy. So we're here with our friends Tom and Lisa Bilyeu. How you doing?
Very good. Excited to be here.
So
we're excited to have you. This is the first time we've had 4 people. So Marina's here. Say hi.
Well, hi.
What up, Marina?
I'm so excited to have you guys here.
We're going to continue our conversation that we've been having, at our various houses and restaurants and different places at our big studio. But it's great to have you here. I'm glad you were able to come. And I understand you received a major award today.
I did.
What was that award?
It was for 50 fastest growing companies with women-owned or women-run businesses. So, yeah, it was very exciting.
And who hosted it?
WPO and JP Morgan.
Wow. Big, the
Thank
big time.
you.
I saw you with your award over your head, holding
It was
it up.
hilarious. The whole crowd went crazy. It was absolutely, yeah. Because she went up with, her usual amount of style, energy. It was very different than most people. Collecting it in a far more business-like way. Lisa's got it up above her head. She's
holding it up
doing her
with the
peace sign.
championship belt.
It was literally like a championship belt. It was hysterical.
In those moments, it's kind of like I speak to the 14-year-old girl in me that was so insecure that would never have dreamt that one day I would be up on stage doing that. So I was just like, I don't want to show up to be what I think I need to be or should be. I want to show up and just let I was so excited. That's why I was just like, yay! Yay me.
How fun. Well, I'd like to let everybody know how we met because we're reasonably new friends, but, meaningful friends. And it started with Marina.
Yep.
So how did you pick this one out of the crowd in order to be able to have her come speak at our event last year?
Well, actually, it was interesting because I was listening at my Let's podcast, and you were on it. You just launched your book. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this woman is something else. I want to get to know her. I want to meet her. I think we're going to be friends. And that's why I reached out to Ed. I was like, can you please connect me with Lisa? And pretty much I think next day we got on the 3-way text and you were just so gracious and like, oh yeah, we started talking. And then I invited you to an event a week later. And she's like, oh yeah, I'm going to come. I was like, what? You're going to do what? You're going to come in person for real? And yeah, so I did not expect that at all, but it was such a pleasure, such a joy to have you on stage. And I think that we felt immediate connection. At least I felt immediate connection. So I was like, that's my girl. That's my homie, I never heard that word before. So now I'm kind of using it. That's my homie.
So I told Tom it was the most hilarious thing because these two glommed onto each other. They ignored everybody else at the event. Backstage, they're in the corner, hugging each other, talking to each other. And I'm like, what is going on? And at the party afterwards, we hadn't met yet. At the party afterwards, there's just off in the corners doing their stuff. I'm like, okay, because I've seen her do that a few times, not a lot of times, but with, for whatever reason, energetically. Connected. But before I go beyond, because you were in the middle of launching your book at that time, tell everybody about your book.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. So, wrote a book. It was definitely not something I ever thought I would do. And I got an offer and I was like, it really does align with my mission because I'm so mission based. So I was like, it definitely aligns with my mission. I've never been an author before, but that doesn't mean that I can't be an author. And so writing the book was just new, fresh, didn't know what I was doing, learn, every step of the way. And then in launching it, again, I just reached out to people that I really care about and I really trust. And Ed was one of them. So when Ed introduced us, I was like, if Ed vouches for them, when you have just people when they vouch, if Ed vouches, I want to talk to this woman. And I grew up insecure, having girls. It was the girls that bullied me. It was the girls that teased me. It was the girls that were cruel and mean to me. And so growing up, I was very resistant to almost giving myself over to female friends, because I was always just skeptical of, like, I had one friend and she was my best friend and I trusted her. And then beyond that, I didn't. And growing up, I realized I was the one now holding myself back from having wonderful female friends, because I was the one that was resistant. So the second I spoke to Marina, I was like, this woman's amazing. I was like, I haven't, same thing. I was like, who is she? And then in those moments, you have that choice of, like, do you just let yourself go, give yourself over to see how genuine they are? And trust is a big thing. And so I just kind of gave myself over to Marina, and you were so generous and so sweet and so kind and so welcoming, and so supportive of the book, especially when I literally...
Tell everybody the name.
Oh, sorry. Radical. I was something like into my girl Marina.
I was like, she is the worst representative of her own book ever.
Everybody
Literally,
needs
this
to
is an
know.
ongoing thing with me.
I know. It's called Radical Confidence. Thank you.
Yeah.
And the reason why I called it that was because people would think, oh my God, you're so confident. How have you built your or how are you so confident? And I still don't feel confident. There are moments where I'm still utterly insecure. And so I was like, what are people seeing? Like, why do people think I'm so confident when, if you heard the voice in my head, if you heard how negative she was to me every single morning, you wouldn't think I was confident. So what is it that people are seeing? And what I realized is people just see me take action. They see me move forward. They see me go on stage and hold the award at the top of my head. And it was purely not out of fear, but I move forward no matter what, because I'm so aligned with my mission and my passion. Now, it's very hard to just say, oh, just do it anyway. That doesn't help anybody. So with the book, I literally broke down in each chapter all the things I actually did when I'm utterly petrified to public speak. Petrified. I still got on stage. When I had no desire to be on camera because I was so insecure, I still got in front of the camera. And what I realized, that's what people see. So the book was really a breakdown of how I went from a totally unhappy, unfulfilled housewife of 8 years to then helping my husband build $1 billion company in Quest Nutrition and now Impact Theory. So that's kind of the crust behind Radical Confidence.
And just for our audience, I probably should have said this when we first started. The range of this conversation, I want to talk about all things entrepreneurship, marketing, Web3, what you've done with your YouTube channel and how many people you've reached, what you've learned along the way, how you figured out how to grow in business together, how you've built a life together, and we've had conversations about the value of relationships and what you've been able to do with that. And we've learned some great things from you with that. And, all things entrepreneurship, all things excellence. I view both of you as artists in your own way. And an artist is one of the things that I admire the most, so, that's all the stuff we're going to talk about. And then wherever else this takes us, so, what do you have?
Well, I mean, it's like, do you want to go straight into deep kind of like conversation questions? Because like I have fun questions that
I'd like to.
Fun question. Let's go.
Before we go all the way in, I'd like to get a little bit of origin story for our audience that don't know you as well. Where did you guys come from? What's your origin of each of you, and then how did you come together? And I think most people, I knew you first from Impact Theory, and then I saw you, and then I connected the dots on Quest, so it was backwards for me. I think a lot of other people knew you as the people who created Quest, and then, became kind of a thought leader in your own individual spaces. But what's the origin story?
You want to go first, baby?
Go for it.
So I'll give it to you in a really fast nutshell.
Okay.
And then if there's anything you want to press into, we can. So both of us have a filmmaking background. So we end up meeting very early in our lives. I was 24, she was 21, both pursuing film at the time. And it becomes very rapidly apparent to both of us, I think, that we just had no idea how to break into the film industry. And it's so different now. People just can't understand. There were no phones with cameras. There was no YouTube. The internet basically didn't exist. It just was a very different time. And so that seemed like this monolithic thing that was completely impenetrable. And so we didn't know how to get in. And so I end up meeting these two very successful entrepreneurs that said, you're coming to the world with your hand out. And if you want to control the art, you have to control the resources. So come with us into business, get rich, and then you can go build your own studio. I was like, oh my God, that's perfect. And I thought it would take 18 months. It took 15 years, but it worked. And through all of that, Lisa in the very beginning was playing the role of the dutiful housewife when we launched Quest. So I'd already done a whole other company, gone through the rigmarole of I'm so unhappy. And even though I'm making money, this is misery. And so she's like, you have to change because this is, it's damaging our marriage. So I quit and they bring me back in and long story, very short. We start Quest, massively successful, exit Quest, and now have the ability to actually build our own studio as I had said we were going to do 15 years earlier. And so we spent the last 6.5 years now building Impact Theory, which is a media company that is designed to ensure that nobody makes it to the age of 15 without encountering a growth mindset at scale through entertainment. And so that's what we're building now. And there's obviously a lot of detail around why that and all that stuff.
We'll get there. And anything different on your?
So no, just to add. So growing up Greek Orthodox, I was told the whole time I would end up being a stay-at-home wife. And when you're told a message over and over again, you do start to believe it, even if it doesn't necessarily resonate initially. So I was like, I'm going to go to America and I'm going to make movies, have these big dreams. But my grandmother growing up was the person that would, wipe the dirt from my knee if I was crying and I fell on the floor. She's like, it's okay. You're going to be okay by the time you get married. Things like that. That was my attempt for a Greek accent, by the way. And you're told little things like that, that's the pinnacle of your life. Get to marriage and everything's going to be fine. My other grandmother in Cyprus told me basically, if your husband hits you, don't worry, it's okay. And that was her message. Now, growing up Greek in a tiny village in the mountains of Cyprus, all she knew was self-preservation because the guy basically ran the house. And so her advice to me was literally, she felt like she was giving me the gift, right? I'm going to tell my grandchild, I'm going to save her just in case. So you can imagine taking these messages as you're growing up and how that shapes you and your belief system. So even though we were going to make movies together and he's like, I'm going to go out and make money for us, babe. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. I'm going to support you. I'm just going to stay home for maybe 6 months. I'm going to cook and I'm going to clean, but that's just temporary. And then you flash forward 8 years. When I go, how did I stay there for 8 years? When I went, it's just going to be for 6 months. It ends up being the belief system that you're taught. And it isn't Tom's fault. It's mine. I didn't speak up. I didn't say I wasn't happy. So for 8 years, as he was chasing money, I was just trying to be the good housewife. And all the time I was emotionally soothing myself. It's okay, Lisa. It's for the greater good. And it's how many people listening right now do things for the greater good, right? The quote where it's you're doing it for your family, you're doing it for your partner, you're doing it for the kids, and it's all just for the greater good. And what ends up happening is you put yourself on the back burner, and that's what I did. And so I want to support my husband. I know I married a very ambitious man, so I'd never ask him to not be ambitious. But when he's being ambitious and he's miserable, that's when I basically stepped in. So that final thing where I'm like, babe, enough's enough, because I support you, but you're not happy. And now you not being happy is bringing it home. And now we don't have that in our relationship. So that to me was I will support you no matter what until it actually affects our relationship. So that became the pivotal piece for him to then pivot. And then he wanted to start Quest Nutrition. And then being the supportive wife, I was like, great, how can I help? So that's kind of the evolution for me in stepping into being business partners with him is I was just being the supportive housewife. And he's like, well, you don't work. Do you mind just shipping bars from the living room floor? Do you mind just weighing ingredients? Do you mind just cutting, we would rent a kitchen on the weekends for 8 hours with our business partners, and all the wives would come with knives and you would literally stand there cutting the protein bars with knives and rolling pins, and you're making, 1,000 bars in 8 hours. But then when you grow at 57,000%, that goes from shipping bars off your living room floor that I was doing. I had no idea what I was doing. I was like, all right, slap a stamp on and move on. To growing 57,000% to that's how I then built our shipping department, because by then we were shipping out $80 million worth of inventory within 2 years. And we were, 5 years in, we were making 1.5 million bars a day. I mean, it was just insane. But that growth pushed me to then decide, who do I want to be? Do I like this? Can I do it? And in the can I do it? And then refining, oh my God, I actually can. That's when I say I found myself. That's when I turned to my husband. I was like, babe, I'm actually profoundly unhappy being a stay-at-home wife. And I feel alive now. And so that became the massive pivot for both of us to become business partners and go on the venture that we're on now.
So interesting. I mean, the idea of having a spouse who's working and you're stay at home.
Yeah.
You weren't unhappy that he was working,
No.
that he was working hard. You're unhappy that he was unhappy.
Correct. And
interesting. And then that rubbed off on the relationship. He came home miserable.
Yes, because it came to the point where, I don't know if you guys have ever been in this situation, a lot of people have in marriage, where it's like when one person's, they just don't want to talk about it. And so it became like the joke, no joke, where he was, it was, I would call it my own personal fight club. It's like he would come home, it's like the one rule, don't talk about work. The second rule is don't talk about work. And so when all I was doing was waiting for him to come home to make me feel a certain way, because I was living vicariously through him. So I would wait for him to come home and say, tell me about your day, babe. What happened? And now he's saying he doesn't want to talk about it. You can imagine I don't have anything to talk about, because I would go to the grocery store, I'd come home, I would walk the puppies. What's the news I have? It was like, oh, whatever gossip was on E! News that day. It was like, did you hear Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston split up? Like that was about all I had to talk about. So when he had nothing else to bring home either, I was like, wow. Now we're both unhappy. This doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so interesting because like one of the things that you said, because you were unhappy as a housewife, and then you kind of like slowly started like, how can I help? How can I help? Because when Eric and I met, he was also a top income earner in the company, and I was just rising star, up and coming. I had my business background since I was 18 years old, but I was trying to find my place in this relationship as well. I was like, okay, what do I do? How do I fit into this model? Because like he already has his distributorship that he's building. On the other side is like, do I join him in his business? Do I start something else? Do I start something of my own? Because for a season, I wanted to be a buyer for different fashion stores. So I was like, oh, I'm just going to be a buyer because like I love fashion. And I realized immediately that I'll travel the world.
She's still a buyer.
Yeah,
I was going to say, I would hire you in a heartbeat. Are you joking?
I'm a buyer
for them, from them.
I'm a buyer for myself now and my family.
They all know her. She's invited on every runway in the world.
I'm not just getting paid for it.
Yes, exactly. Well,
I'm spending money. But I thought I was like, even though I would enjoy it a lot, I wouldn't be able to see my husband because I assumed that position or that business would allow me to travel the world and a lot more often than potentially he could come with me. And because he travels a lot in his work, I was like, okay, so we will be traveling a lot separate, very, very few times together. So, and I immediately recognized that our marriage is probably not going to survive that because I'm not going to see him. He's not going to see me. And it's just going to be challenging. So I kind of like tried to learn, how do I fit into your world by asking questions? How can I help? And then slowly I realized like, oh, there are certain things that he does amazingly well. And there are certain things that I have talents and skills that he not necessarily likes to do. So I was like, let me take that part of your shoulders and let me contribute in my own way so I can find my contribution and I can find my happiness. But one thing I wanted to ask you is like, because I read your book, and in the book is like, I had no idea how I do this or how I'm going to ship and how I'm going to do all of those things. And you taught yourself so many things about business. And you and I had a conversation before when you invited me on your podcast. And I think that so many people right now listening and watching us, they would potentially reserve back and says like, what, how do you expect me to do this? How do you expect me to ship millions of bars or whatever it is in a single day or in a single moment when I have no clue? And they would kind of like go back and say, it's like, it's not my fault. I don't know how to do that. You pushed forward. You instead is like, okay, let me educate myself. How can I figure it out? So what do you think was kind of like, what was going on through your head? Why you kind of like chose to push forward instead of leaning back?
Oh, great question. So when Tom came home, he was like, babe, all right, I want to start a protein bar company with his business partners. And I was like, okay. And he's like, and I want to put the house up for collateral. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? Hello, what? This house that we literally just bought, the house that I had envisioned I was going to have children in, and I was going to bring up our kids in this house. You want to put it up for collateral, and you refer to it as, well, women see a house as a nest, men see a house as a nest egg. Now, at the time, I didn't actually understand that. So I was like, this is our house. What do you mean? But I understood he's very ambitious, and I knew the man that I married. So that was like, okay, I'm not tied to a house. I can get a new house. If the company fails, which is a huge possibility, I could lose my house. But if I said no to my husband, it's like, I don't want to sell the house. I don't want to risk it. That's now asking him to be someone he's not. And I can't get another Tom. So I was like, so that became the easy decision, was like, oh yeah, that makes it easy for me. Let's put the house up for collateral. But at the same time, we better not lose our house. So when he's now at his other job trying to exit, and now we've got quests that we're building on the side, everything was, the day-to-day things were left to me because I wasn't working. And in those moments, like you said, in those moments where I'm like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, I had a choice. I can go to my husband. I can say, hey, I'm not going to hold up my end of the bargain, because that's what it was, right? You agree that we're in this together. And I think of partnership as exactly that. You have to pinky swear that you're both in it together, and then you have to move forward like it's together. So it wasn't like all of a sudden I felt like, well, that was a his thing and I was just part of it. Once I said yes, once we agreed, it was 50-50, and hell, there was no way I was not going to hold up my end of the bargain when he was out busting his ass every day for the family. So in those moments where I had no idea what I was doing, in those moments where I felt, the imposter syndrome, what the hell do you know, Lisa, about shipping bars? What the hell do you know about, developing a software system with the tech? Like, I didn't know anything. Anytime I didn't know, I had the choice. You can go and tell him you don't know. You can fail. Or you can pull up your sleeves and go, I'm going to freaking learn. And with that attitude, you just push forward. And so when you go to learn, and when someone says no, you don't accept it. And it becomes a choice. When someone says no, you choose to either not act or to propel yourself forward. And every time I realized this is a choice, and I didn't want to let my husband down because I was in it too. It was 50-50. I was holding my end of the bargain, and by golly, I wasn't going to fail him.
So interesting. I the reason why I respect you guys on a different level, for a bunch of different reasons. One of the reasons is there are thought leaders, and there are thought leaders who have built a real business. And I'm not saying that thought leaders don't have a real business, but it's different. If it's an information business, or they've grown a podcast, or they build a team of doing things, you know what I mean? Or they're releasing books. That's one thing, right? And that's all great stuff that I've done. And then there's building something enterprise scale, $1 billion valuation type of an enterprise. That's a different animal. And there's a handful, there are some thought leaders that have invested in those. And then there's some who have actually built them, like Jamie Kern-Lehman built one, as another example, right? In this, so I love trying to find clues in the success path of entrepreneurs. And I want to talk about risk, and just ask about your philosophy on risk, and has it changed? Because we are very risk tolerant. Typically in relationships that I've seen, there's a spender and a saver. Somebody's got their foot on the gas and somebody else has their foot on the brake. We're both spenders. So there's nobody to say no. There's no voice of reason to show up.
Nobody's putting on a
and
break
say,
either.
what are you doing? So, and it's changed, sometimes when you don't have a lot to lose, you can be more risk tolerant. And then, it starts to change as you get more and more and more and more, you need to start adapting that philosophy a bit. I'm just wondering what yours was early, what it's been in the middle, and what it is today, how that's evolved.
Yeah, I wouldn't say, for better or worse, I wouldn't say, and I'll speak for myself, that my risk tolerance has changed. So one of my entrepreneurial superpowers is I have an extreme ability to endure risk. And we have won and lost. But none of that has changed my thinking around how you go about this one chance that you have at life.
Can I ask something on that? Like at the beginning, you risked everything, mortgaged the house, did all this stuff. Like Elon Musk, when he took PayPal money and poured it all into the next. Would you do that again today with your entire net worth?
I mean, we are doing it right now.
Really?
So, I mean, look, we're not anywhere near our entire net worth, but we are.
But you're still swinging.
Yeah. And we haven't taken on outside capital. We've done everything ourselves. So that is largely what is the type of risk that you want to take? So I don't mind losing my own money. I'm very confident that I'll always exist financially in the 1%. I may not always be mega wealthy. If, when people say they couldn't spend $1 billion, I'm just like, you have no imagination. I could spend $1 billion in a weekend. So that is
no imagination.
Yeah. Like once you start building something, you realize very quickly, it's very easy to spend a lot of money very fast. So I'm well aware that, we're trying to build the next Disney without taking an outside capital. So that's, just speaking conservatively, that would take billions of dollars, right? So we already know we have to create a self-sustaining economic engine. And so it's like we're pouring as much into that as we can to get it going and to get it to be its own thing. But what we're building is a very difficult build so we're building a video game for people that don't know. And a typical AAA game is going to take between 5 and 7 years and somewhere between 150 million and $1 billion. So to give people the lay of the land, Rockstar is releasing Grand Theft Auto 6 and it costs them $1 billion to go to market. So these are extraordinarily capital intensive endeavors. So we are taking a huge risk there. We're really inventing a new kind of entertainment format for gaming. Could be a total bust, but that doesn't scare me. So looking at all of that and thinking through that, you really do have to navigate between the two of you of, what is the worst case scenario? What's the reality? What does that look like? Face that head on. If you can face your worst case scenario, then keep going. And if you can't, then you need to make a change. And so I'll be honest, we probably wouldn't put all of our money at risk. Like if we really got down to this just isn't working, we would deploy some sort of cut the company, because there's a part of the company that's profitable and there's a part of the company that's just a huge drag on resources. And so we would put some sort of firewall or whatever. But we are very comfortable with a tremendous amount of our net worth being at risk.
Wow.
We could really go in some weird angles right now. Like I have fear of risk in other areas.
Like what?
So being in California now makes me very concerned. And we had a lot more money in California real estate until recently. I saw the writing on the wall in terms of just bad decision-making for the kind of real estate that we owned. And so we were selling as much as we could. We were not fast enough on our own home. So by the time I lifted my head up and really was like, okay, we're going to have to, we should really try to sell this. It was a year too late. So that makes me uncomfortable. I don't have that kind of tolerance for risk. When I look at what's going on from a regulatory perspective, like there's things you can see the states now aren't just battling it out on taxes anymore. They're battling now regulatory. And so
an ideology almost.
Not almost.
Red and blue, yeah.
Like literally. And the red and blue thing scares me even more. But even before you get to that, and I suppose it's an echo to some degree of that, but just looking at, if you think about a state as a company and they're trying to get customers, and those customers are the people that live in the country. So they're going to try to do things to win over their customers. And when I look at what some of the legislation is being passed that is very, what I'll call anti-entrepreneurial, you start looking at, okay, well then where is going to be pro-entrepreneurial? And I feel about California the way Lisa felt about the house that I put up for, collateral, which is, I thought I was going to live my whole life here. And so I can't believe for the first time, I feel a sense of, I'm actually now getting uncomfortable with the level of risk that just being in California is making me take against my business, because you end up hemorrhaging so much capital into tax policies, things.
You feel like you become a target of sorts?
I mean, somewhat. You could look at things like that. I'll reserve,
or just policy is going against you.
It's just there are things that work and there are things that don't work. And so my favorite Thomas Sowell quote, and I think this really sums up what we're living through right now. He said, the last 30 years have been marked by exchanging what works for what sounds good. And when you run a company and you're the only one at risk, so you're not running somebody else's company, it's your money, it's your house that's on the line. All of a sudden you get very sober about what is working, what's generating revenue. Like, let's not even be vague. What is generating profitable revenue and what isn't? And sometimes the thing that's generating profitable revenue is not the thing that you want to be generating profitable revenue. Maybe you don't think it's cool. Maybe you don't think it has a future, whatever, but it's the thing that's generating profitable revenue. And then there are things that you wish were working, you wish the public liked, you wish that they did the things that you wanted them to do, and they just don't. And in a business, you can't do clever things to get your way out of that. You just have to build a better product that people want more and are willing to pay for. You have to drive your costs down. And so, I don't know how weird we want to get in this interview, but
I'm willing to go as weird as you want to go, because I want to talk about not only that, but what are the global risks? What are the political risks? What are the cultural risks that we all have to navigate in today's world, which is getting, pretty polarized in a lot of different directions, kind of anti-entrepreneur or, pro-entrepreneur. You've got, labor, and you've got management. You've got all different kinds of sides in race, in gender, in religion, in everything. And everybody's stoking the fire one way or the other, or powers that be are stoking the fire. And that creates, I think, risk factors as well in all businesses, as far as what you can say, what you should say, what you shouldn't say, what you should stand for, what you shouldn't, where you should live. Are you living there? Oh, maybe we should judge you based upon where you're living. Yeah. Those types of things.
Agreed. So that's the area that I would say I'm far more concerned in terms of something that's tripping my risk tolerance, because I don't feel like I have control. Whereas money, I feel like I have control. So if something isn't working and I'm just hemorrhaging capital and it becomes too much, you put an amount that you're willing to lose and you say, okay, fire break, we're not going to go past that, and you downsize or whatever you have to do. So none of that scares me. I still feel like, yep, this is all according to plan. I don't know yet if the plan is going to work, but it's all according to plan. We've got the reserves. We know how much we're willing to spend, so on and so forth. But for the first time with that kind of stuff, regulatory legislation, we are living through a moment where things are changing so rapidly that I don't think people are I don't even know if it's possible to make all the right decisions because of the rate of change. But if you're actively making decisions based on anything other than metrics that you say you care about, and then you steer towards what actually gives us those outcomes or not, you're just going to increase the speed with which you crash. So that I'm looking at, that I'm really analyzing with maybe I don't have as much tolerance for risk when I'm not in control. And so I've always thought of myself as somebody that I can endure any level of risk, but I'm realizing now it's only when I feel like I can sway the outcome. Once I feel like it's a machine too big, then I start thinking about my risk tolerance very differently.
So where was the weird place you were going to go with that?
Just what is money? And so when you think about a government can print its way out of problems until it can't. And so right now we're in I'll shout out to Ray Dalio, anybody that doesn't know, and built the largest hedge fund in the world. There is not a human being that has been more successful at betting on where is the world going in all of human history than Ray Dalio. So when Ray Dalio says, hey, I got this good because I go and I evaluate civilizations, the rise and fall of their currencies, and that they all move through these very predictable cycles. It's a 6 cycle that everyone moves through if you become an empire, if you're lucky enough. And to give you calibration, stage 6 is utter collapse, usually warfare, and he pegs America at stage 5.5. Ooh. So we are doing all of the things that a classic end of an empire country will do. Yeah, I mean, it tells you how my mind works. And so we are that company that thinks it's going to be able to print its way out, but really just has to make a better product. And so as a country, we're doing things that I think are, they don't make sense in terms of the outcomes that we all want. Now, to the left-right thing, I will say this. My brothers and sisters, I love you all. And this is a problem as old as time. There's a reason that things break into left and right, which we can get into if you guys want, but there's a reason for it. And it will work really well. It will continue working into the future. If we all want the tension between us, the second we don't want the tension, everything will fall apart. And so if I were going to literally beseech people as a person whose entire life is driven by, I want to see you do better. I don't know who you are, but I want to see you do better. And I've got my bona fides. We can go into that too if we want, but I've got bona fides when I say that. And so I've really put my life's energy where my mouth is right now. And I want to see people succeed. And I'm just saying, to do that, you have to know what your metric is. And you have to understand that your worldview is not objectively right. The other person's worldview is not objectively right. And so what you have to believe in is that, I'm not objectively right because I'm an emotional creature. You're not objectively right because you're an emotional creature, and something I call frame of reference. And it is very difficult to even see that you have a frame of reference, let alone pierce that frame of reference and see yourself from the outside. So since I know I'm effectively blind, I need to want the tension between left and right. And that in that tension, in valuing the tension, not in softening your own stance, in valuing the tension between those two polarities, you get to somewhere useful. And the reason I'm now worried is we have lost respect for the tension. We want the other side to stop existing. And to give you an idea, I don't want to convince everybody to be on my side. I want to, I don't think in sides. I think in solutions to a problem. And so I want everybody to understand, on any given problem, you want to be nimble. You don't want a prescribed, I'm on this team and therefore I know how I'm supposed to think about this thing. You want to go, what's my goal? What's the metric that not I've picked? What metric accurately is an early indicator of success towards that goal? And then do whatever that takes. And I will just tell you right now, it's going to be the tension between the people who look at the world differently. And they fundamentally break as follows in every society. There are people who are deeply compassionate and don't want to see anybody get left behind. Amazing. And then there are people who believe in personal responsibility and don't want anybody freeloading. Amazing. You need them both, because if you don't have compassion, obviously you have tyranny. And if you have compassion, but you don't have its balancing force, you also have tyranny. And so it's pathology on both sides. And I love having this conversation in somebody that grew up in the USSR.
I want to talk about that.
Yeah, because this is where it's just played out. And so what we have is a bunch of people that have grown up well in an empire that's been an empire for everyone's entire lifetime that's alive. And we're not recognizing that, much like obesity is actually a disease of caloric affluence, that what we're going through in the decisions that we're making culturally is a cultural disease of affluence. Things have been too good for too long, and we don't recognize that the choices that we're making is like diabetes of society. Don't know a better way to say it, but that's basically where we're at. And if everyone goes, the one thing I know is I'm not right, we'll be fine. But right now, everybody's going, the one thing I know is that I'm right. And so that worries me deeply.
I'm curious as to Marina's and listening to you talk about the tension, Marina's experience growing up in the former Soviet Union from Ukraine, and where there wasn't a tension allowed. There was no tension allowed in ideology.
Yeah, it's what happens when
you had to buy into the party line, and then the collapse of that, and what happens in that vacuum of lack of leadership and lack of no leadership. Leadership was squashed. Like effectively today, the second and third layer of leadership within all of Russia, for example, has been eliminated. Either put in prison or systematically eliminated. So if the head guy is gone, there's virtually nothing to step up because the farm team's been destroyed. When it comes to the future leaders. But as you grew up in that, and what we're dealing with this tension, which is healthy, which I agree, is something that's important to be able to kind of embrace the differences and be able to live in the debate without wanting to destroy each other. Living with that, and then living with the collapse of that, and then coming over here and experiencing this compared to that, because she yells at the television saying, you don't know what you're messing with, basically.
Yeah.
If I was to paraphrase, I lived through this and you are repeating the pattern that I got to see growing up. So
Right.
talk about that.
I mean, it's just interesting to see because, like, when I was growing up in the Soviet Union, it's just fascinating how much we can be influenced. Just exactly what's happening right now in the United States and pretty much all over the world by the media, by the government, by, talking heads, pushing specific agenda, right? So during the Soviet Union time, it was a communism. So everybody had to march in one direction, and God forbid somebody would say left or right, or it's like people were thrown in jail for something so ridiculously stupid that is just like, let alone voicing their disagreements. Like that was just kind of like people would die for that, but they were thrown in jail just for some minimal stuff. And on the other side, I remember, I don't really tell that story often, but I was coming back, I was 7 years old, coming back from school, and I'm bawling my eyes out. I'm just crying so hard. And you would think that somebody really near and dear to my heart died, somebody in my family, somebody very, very close to me. And I'm crying, and I'm like in such a lost state. It's like, I don't even know how it was going on and what was exactly going through my 7-year-old brain. And I'm just like crying, and Brezhnev died. So the guy who was running the country at that time died. And in my 7-year-old head, I was just like, the only man who knows how I should live my life. Because that's what we were told since we were little. The party knows how do you need to live. The government knows how do you need to prosper and what your life should look like. And now all of a sudden, the guy who runs the whole show, he died. So I have no clue how I'm going to live. And I was so lost in my head. And I kind of like started thinking, it's like how brainwashed I was at that time and how the entire country was brainwashed. And right now we kind of like pretty much marching in the same direction. We are right now so lost, and we are not allowed to come up with our own opinion, with our own view on things. Because like, I love what you said, Tom, but it's everybody's like, I'm right, you wrong, and there is nothing in the middle. So we're losing compassion in learning. It's like we're coming from different cultures. We're learning and seeing world in a different way. So communicating with respect and stating our point of view, because your experience of life might be a little bit different than my experience, but the truth comes in that conversation, right? So having the ability to go through your experiences and me seeing it through your eyes and you seeing my experiences through my eyes and finding something that will create a better path for everybody. I think that that's what we're losing more than anything. And I remember when Soviet Union collapsed, it was such a fascinating kind of like place where everybody's so lost, because on one side everybody were excited, but we did not know what to do with all that freedom and what to do with all this freedom of choice, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of everything. So it became a wild, wild west. So I lived through actual wild, wild west in the sense like there was mafia. I mean, it's like I dealt with so much craziness that you cannot even imagine. I remember I opened my store when I was 18 years old, and I remember two kids, they were probably in their 20s. They came into my store and they said, like, we're so and so, we're going to be your roof. So you have to pay us on a monthly basis so we protect you. And I was like, what are you talking about? And at that time, I was already kind of exposed to that idea that you have to pay somebody to protect you. Otherwise, your business is going to be burned, destroyed, or you can be tortured. I mean, it's like literally. Like no joke. So at that time, I was already kind of like, because I already had my roof, I already had the protection and everything else. And now thinking through all of this, I was like, this is insane. I mean, it's like, this is insane. Thank God we don't have to do any of that in our business right now. But to extent, it's just, it's just different. We just have to figure out the ways, because now the government and the media and everybody is just putting those shackles in our hands and on our mouth not to speak up for what we believe, because all of a sudden what we believe can get you canceled, can get you thrown to jail, can get you in a lot of different trouble, which again, in my opinion, is like, if we have the ability with respect to voice our differences and find a common ground, I think the world would be so much better place. And that's why when I see what's happening in States is just like, and I was like, I keep telling Eric, it's like, we have a freedom of speech in this country. We have a freedom of speech. And then I see it's like, you guys don't have a freedom of speech. Like you have the belief that you do, but you don't. And Eric keeps telling me, it's like, you have the freedom of speech. We just don't have freedom of consequences. There are consequences that come with that freedom of speech. But at the same time, it's just like a whole thing is just so fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, first time I go there, right? As an American, we're dating and we go to Kiev and we're driving, and she's driving 160 miles an hour, terrifying in the rain, from Kiev to Odessa, and I'm like, okay, no seatbelt, no nothing. She's just going. I'm like, you gonna do seatbelt? Well, we don't do seatbelts here. Like, okay. She gets pulled over. I'm like, oh man, this is gonna be something. The guy just with a little baton pulls her over, and she's just like, it's okay. Pulls out a little bit of money and hands the papers and hands him some money, and off she goes. I'm like, did you just pay? Did you just pay that police officer? Whoa. You say, yeah, that's what they do here. Matter of fact, these people on the side of the road, they bid for these jobs because the official salary is very low, but they'll get money based upon the quality of the car. They'll get essentially tips, bribes, right? And I said, that's just normal. I said, well, please don't do that in the United States, because our bribery is not, your bribery is just on top of the table. Ours is kind of like through courts and through attorneys and through all different, lobby, all different other kinds of things. We still kind of pay, but it's not as direct as what you're dealing with there. It's just like, wow. Like official salaries are very, very low. Very few people are paying taxes, all kinds of stuff. So you see how this perpetuates. You hear about corruption in all these different things. And being around the country or being around the world, we kind of see different levels of corruption everywhere in every country, including ours. But I find I've never really thought about the value of tension between two different ideologies and how important that is.
I look at it from an evolutionary standpoint. So there is a reason that you get these dualities. And if you think about evolution, only has one aim: to keep you alive long enough so that you have kids that have kids. So it only has two levers to pull: pleasure and pain. And if you think about every motivation that you have in life, it is nature pulling on one of those levers. So nature wants to make sure you have kids. So sex is about the most pleasurable thing that you're going to do. Nature needs to make sure that those kids live. So you have pair bonding. And I'm going to guess that one day a study will come out that shows that the men who are the most monogamous have the most receptors for vasopressin and oxytocin. And
you have to explain what that means.
So those are the bonding hormones. So when you orgasm, that's what's released. And so when you're with somebody and you have a sexual life that's thriving with them, you're going to constantly be bonding. And so that is nature going, hey, I need you to stay together long enough to raise these kids effectively. Now, just to rush into the things that are going to get us canceled, this is also why you have the duality between male and female, right? So that there is as you're raising the kids, they're the two sides of the coin from, I mean, I don't know the easiest way to sum it up, but to nurture and to protect. Maybe that's the most generous way to say it. So, and obviously it's so nuanced, but that is where when you start looking at nature has to start to balance these things out, because what ends up happening is, let's say that you had a society. In fact, there's this an idea that's very well known in economic circles called the tragedy of the commons. And the tragedy of the commons is like the first thing you learn in economics class. And it's basically, if you have land that nobody owns and therefore anyone can graze their sheep on it, everybody rushes their own sheep on it. They graze it until there's nothing left, because they know if I don't, somebody else will. It's exactly what's happening to the oceans right now. It's getting overfished and nobody's repopulating it, because if you repopulate it, you're a chump, because somebody else is going to come fish your fish. So you spent money to make somebody else money. Doesn't make sense. And if you don't go fish it, somebody else will. And so you might as well take advantage. And this is why you have so many species vanishing. So you've got the tragedy of the commons set up. And that's why, given that that is the way things are, because nature is red in tooth and claw, meaning that we've come up through millions of years of evolution where you either ate me or I ate you, right? Even down to like the amoeboid level. Just that's how things went. It's like, I need the parts that you are made of in order to sustain the parts that I am made of. And so you would go and you eat. And so that is the nature. So you have already an adversarial setup. And we're relearning this in AI. This gets so interesting. You're going to have to stop me, and I'm going to get on this tirade here. So we're relearning this in AI, that one of the most effective ways to build an AI is what they call adversarial learning. So you want to pit these things against each other to see what's going to come up with the most effective solution. Mm-hmm. And that is evolution.
Get them to fight?
Which one can come to the outcome the best, the fastest, most efficiently, most whatever. And so they will literally pit them against each other with meaning go do the task, and whichever one of you does better effectively lives and gets to put the answer forward, or is the algorithm that we're going to move forward, depending on what they're doing. Exactly.
Or the other one gets a punishment.
Yes, and that punishment could be you're pulled out of the replication pool. We're not using that algorithm anymore. So it is it is a system that works incredibly well. But if you're using an adversarial system, you don't want one to win over the other, because now it becomes vulnerable. This is why the thing that you want when you pick a significant other that you're going to have children with is genetic diversity, so that they will survive if there's a fungus that happens to kill one type of, DNA sequence. It's like you want that to be as diversified as humanly possible.
Let me ask a question about that. So I've always been fascinated and kind of bewildered. You look at the UK, for example, and they have, how many different political parties? 10, 12, it's a lot, right?
Yep.
United States, 2. And it is essentially 50-50. It's essentially 50-50 in elections, 50-50 in the Congress, 50-50 in Senate.
Yep.
And I've always been kind of stunned by that. Would we do better to have more? I don't know. This one's so entrenched. But what I'm hearing is that might be the 50-50 itself might be one of the most valuable things, because if it swings to 70-30 or 80-20, then the 80 is going to just lord over the 20 and beat them into submission and shut their mouths. Yep. And not give them any power to be able to do anything.
Correct. So this is why you really have to be careful about how you structure the system. So the US experiment, which as of right now, I would say has thrived for 200 years. We're still a young country when you really stop and think about it. But it's been a pretty extraordinary experiment that has yielded the biggest technological breakthroughs of the last 100 years easily. And certainly it has been the global leader in the age where we have moved the most people out of poverty, has been this two-party system, this democratic experiment that we call the United States. So there is something there. But a big part of the reason that the system was structured was to make change difficult, because they understood how fast things can fall to tyranny. And so this is not an area that I'm an expertise at all. So I request of everybody listening grace and just exploring these very difficult topics. And I'll try to be as thoughtful as I can. But I read a lot of history, and it's really opened my eyes. And I'm reading a book right now called The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. And were it not for, this is my layman's take, I am not a historian, but reading this book, which is pretty profound, if I remember right, won a Pulitzer Prize. Very, very amazing documentation of what happened and how the hell did Hitler rise to power? Because it just seems so impossible. And one of the ways that he rose to power is because they had all of these different parties. And so he didn't have to have a majority of the vote or a majority of people behind him in order to get control, because it was about who can I get to align with me for a brief moment so I can get what I need, get whatever law passed I want passed, make the changes I want to make. And then all of a sudden this guy comes out of absolutely nowhere and takes over everything. Now, is that impossible in a two-party system? I'd never say it's impossible. But when you have something that races towards 50-50 and it's very difficult and people have to be compelling in order to convince people, and you're in full public view, it's not just the dealings going on behind the scenes. I do not want to downplay those. To your point about that's where a lot of shenanigans, I'm sure, are going on.
Well, and not to go too deep on it, but I mean, the one thing that I'm irritated about the most in American politics is the executive order, because the president can write an executive order and doesn't need to have to work with Congress and the Senate in order to be able to do certain things. You know what I mean? I like the debate. I like the friction. I like the push. With those different things. And I think about countries that have no resistance. One party essentially, Russia, China, Korea, Iran, others that, no effective resistance. You're all kind of under one thing. Where does that end up? It's going to be interesting to see how it plays.
Here's the really bad news. The experiment has already been run many, many times. Now, it's possible that China vacillating between, again, I fully acknowledge that I am outside of what I know well, so I am merely thinking through a difficult topic. But when I look at China and having read about the rise of Mao and how Mao came into power, and for anybody that wants to know, there's an incredible book called Mao, The Unknown Story. It is unbelievable. It's part of a trifecta of books that aren't naturally related to each other, but I think people should read. And that would be Mao, The Unknown Story, Red Famine, which is about what happened in the Ukraine, which is just unbelievable. And then the Gulag Archipelago, which is about Russia and the Gulag system and what happens when there's only one party. And so realizing that that Stalin and Mao came up together and were working on deals together, and Mao was trying to win Stalin's favor, and that there was just all this back and forth about trying to create these communist states. But you hear what needs to be done to get people to fall in line with that, unfortunately, is devastating. Because even if you extend, again, in my opinion, this is not my area of expertise, but it has suddenly felt increasingly important for many, many, many people to think through this problem for themselves and to begin to formulate a hypothesis about what they think this all means and where it goes and what matters. And so my minor contribution to that would be in reading about this. So I'm coming at things from an evolutionary perspective. I've done that my entire adult life. To deal with my own anxiety, I had to start taking a biological approach. To get good at entrepreneurship, I had to take a biological approach. And so really understanding nature and how it works and these competitive systems and what they yield. And so knowing that humans are a certain way, our brains work a certain way. And once you take a large group of people, they really start to become pretty predictable. And it gets very difficult to get everyone to agree on anything. And so the moment you say, because I'll even grant that, let's say that communism really has beautiful aims and that there is no corruption. If you read Mao, The Untold Story, you will rapidly realize it's just corrupt from top to bottom. But even setting it aside, let's just say he did it wrong, but the idea itself is right. The reason I don't think it will ever bring about human prosperity, which is what I would say is the thing that we should aim at, the reason it just cannot bring about that human prosperity is it forces agreement. because it forces you, maybe you're better at something. I mean, this is Ukrainian all day. It's so interesting having this conversation with somebody who actually has a Ukrainian accent. So no, for real, like if you've read the books I've read, you would understand that Ukraine is somehow like, they're always in the fucking thick of it. And it's just like, they get the brunt of this stuff. So anyway, you guys were producing so much of the food for Russia. Communism takes over and they're like, hey, we need equal outcome for everybody. Equal outcome, not opportunity, outcome. And so if you're able to get more grain yield per acre of land, you're stealing. But now imagine that's how you view things. And they really did. So they went in and started killing them. They were like, you're what they called a kulak. So you're like robbing from everybody else. And they're like, whoa, 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 I'm just a better farmer. Nope, you must be stealing. That's the only way this could happen. And so they just killed them or put them in the gulags. And so now what you've done is you take your best producers and you enslave them in the gulags or you just kill them. Now what's going to happen? You have the people who aren't as good running the farms. And so what happened? I mean, we don't even have to ask. They all starved to death. And so it ends up being one of the most horrifying moments in certainly modern history. I'm sure there were equally terrifying moments earlier because this is sort of the human cycle. But even if they were doing it because they really just were like, it isn't fair that you're able to get more out of your corn yield than the next person. Like, that's not fair. It doesn't feel good. And I get that. It doesn't feel good. But some people are going to be better at things than others. It just is what it is. And so now to get everybody to agree, you have to imprison and kill, or at a minimum silence. And so even if you mean it from a beautiful place, like really, really beautiful, when they come to your door and they're like, we have to take that from you now, people react and they push back. And then you have to use force. And then the second you're using force, it all falls apart.
The simple, I'll give a simple example that I've heard, and then I want to hear what you have to say with it too, is, there's A students, C students, and F students, and you decide to, A students, the F students, deserve to have something, so we're going to take some of your grades and give it to them so everybody can be C's. You just destroy all ambition. You destroy all kind of upward growth. It's the reason why I'm such a big fan of capitalism as a general principle, because I think it drives the right kind of aims for people to compete and bring value. And, I'm not saying necessarily compare, but engage in commerce and be part of that whole conversation and be forced to bring more value. I love the fact that capitalism kind of forces that, but your thoughts?
I mean, it's like, I think that the example that you just described, it just repeats itself in history, like on and on and on, socialism, capitalism, performers and non-performers, participation trophy and all this nonsense. So that's why I was like, when I hear people, it's just like, when I hear how much we want to destroy people who actually create and invent and make this world a better place through the struggle of the entrepreneurship and what they're making it, then all the progress in the world is because of people who are not willing to kind of like settle for a mediocre life. They're striving for something greater. They're reaching for their stars. They're making mistakes. They're falling on their face, but they're getting up and creating something different and new and better. And at the same time, when we feel, oh, you got more lucky than I am, or you had a better background than I am, or you have more talents, or you have a better soil, or you're a much more productive farmer than I am, let me take it from you instead of me growing and me becoming better and me learning and me improving my skill set. That's what I think is going to destroy us as humanity, by not understanding that we need to support. And again, I'm not, like you said, I'm not a historian. I'm not an economist, even though I have a banking degree, but it's nothing in comparison to the global macroeconomies. But I think that's what is going to wipe us out as a humanity, just destroying the people who are creating, like we talked about Ayn Rand book, right? People who are producing. If we're going to punish producers, if we're going to take it from them through taxes, through different legal, cutting up different ways of them doing business, if we continue to do that, then we're going to be left with people who either do not have the knowledge or desire or the work ethic to continue to grow food, to continue to build
Innovate.
homes, or innovate, or just basically sustain the humanity. I mean, it's just
What are your thoughts on all
fascinating.
this? You've been silent as we've been
Yeah,
having this
I
conversation.
don't really get too political, and
Really?
I don't know enough about it, and so I love listening to my husband. As he was talking, I was like, his brain
You
is
need to
very
go home with him.
his brain is very sexy. Can I be honest?
That's a threat, I'm afraid.
But if we want to switch topics and talk about the brain, because you talked in several interviews that I've seen on the internet, and also in our interview at the event, you mentioned that you really wanted to be successful, and somehow you chose to believe that you're not smart. Can you go into that and just because listening to you, and everybody is right now listening, they're just probably, I was like, oh my gosh, this dude is so smart. Oh my gosh, he's so smart. What made you believe that you're not?
So I made a very important choice to believe that I could get better at anything. And I needed to believe that because I have never felt smart in my entire life. And this is one of those, nobody has to worry about me even now. So
Wow.
I don't, no one needs to worry. I don't lack self-esteem. I am an egomaniac. Everybody can relax that I'm not trying to downplay myself. This is me. And what I hope is that anybody that struggles feeling like they're not enough or they're not going to be able to make it, one, that is part of the 3-part thing that makes for ultra successful people. And shout out to somebody that we all know and think is amazing, Alex Hormozy, who introduced this idea to me, that they did a study, and the 3 qualities that all successful people have is that they have just an absolute blind, almost naive belief that they can do anything, coupled with the second trait, a just absolute crippling fear that they're not good enough. And then the third thing, which is certainly the 4 of us have, is the ability to delay gratification. And when you put those 3 things together, you can do extraordinary things. So while I did not intentionally cultivate a sense of intellectual inferiority, for whatever reason, my whole life, I've been surrounded by people that are clearly smarter than me in ways, and I'll even define intelligence. It's the ability to process raw data quickly. So I can't do that. Now, I will concede that I think through problems deeply. And so I don't rush to snap judgments. I have a very open mind. I'm driven by, again, what works. I have a goal, and does this belief or piece of knowledge allow me to more or less accurately predict the outcome of my behaviors? Because I just think we're all a prediction engine. And if people stay focused on that, they're going to be good. So anyway, as a kid, I'm constantly around people that are better than me. I watched this movie called Amadeus. It's not a documentary in any stretch of the imagination, but it's based on real characters. So Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. And then his contemporary is a guy named Salieri. And in the movie, Salieri laments to God, why did you make me just good enough at piano to realize I will never be as good as Mozart? And in that moment, I felt like I was seen and understood. And I was like, oh my God, this is my life. I'm just smart enough to realize that I'll never be Einstein, that I'll never be Elon Musk, whatever, right? And so for a while, that really crippled me, and it stopped me from moving forward. And that was a really dark time in my life, because I felt like, why, I don't believe in God now, but at the time, like, why, God, did you give me all of these big dreams and aspirations, but not make me smart enough to be able to get there? And it was crushing. And I would come home, and I'm out of college at this point. I'm not like a little kid. I would come home and lay face down on the carpet in my apartment, because I was like, I know what I want to be, and I'll never be it. And it was really, really devastating. And so I was like, well, I don't like feeling like this. And I refuse to feel like this the rest of my life. So what the hell do I do? Because if I can't be smarter, it is what it is. And I'm at that point was really driving my life in the wrong direction. And so I'm like, I want to get up off this carpet. What's going to be the answer? And so, as I mentioned earlier, I turned to brain science, and I started reading about the brain. Now, this is the late 90s. And so I'm hearing about this thing called brain plasticity, which we all take for granted now, but at the time was like really debated. And it was, can you really learn new things as you get older? And some people were saying, nope, studies show that's it. You know, by the time you're like 15 or whatever, dies cast, done.
Can't teach a dog new tricks,
Yeah.
an old dog new tricks.
Finished. And others were saying, no, you can learn something new at any time. And so I said, okay, I'm deciding right here and now that I'm going to act as if that's true. And I'm going to live my life as if I can get better at anything. And now my life is a reflection of the truth of that. So I want people to understand that you're average. Just be comfortable being average. I can accept myself as average. I don't need to be more than that, because what I've learned is, again, evolution, every species has to make a choice. Do you come pre-hardwired with everything, or do you come hardwired with a few things, but then have a layer of culture on top where you can now get a download of everything that people learned before you, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to reinvent fire. Like we can pass it on real fast. And so you acclimatize to whatever era, place you're growing up in. This is why humans can be found in every nook and cranny of the globe. We can adapt to anything. And so once you realize, hey, yes, you're average, but the average human is designed to grow and get better. That is the strategy at a species level that we have chosen. So let's just put a number to it. Let's say that any of us can pick any set of skills and you can get, over the course of your life, 100 times better at that thing. Now, what happens when you become 100 times better at investing your money? What happens when you become 100 times better at being a parent, at running a business? 100 times better at being a marketer, a banker, whatever. Like your life will be unrecognizable. Now, that doesn't mean, like, take me in basketball. Me 100 times better at basketball than I am naturally does not make me LeBron James. And so I may never be the greatest of all time at that. But you can transform your life. And that's what I'm trying to get people to understand. So look, it is very flattering, and I can't shake how cool I think it is when people are smart. So when people tell me that I'm smart, I love it. It's wonderful. But I try not to invest any of my self-esteem in that, because it is way too frequent that I run into people that are just smarter, faster than I am, have accomplished way more than I have. So instead, I build my raging ego around identifying the right answer faster than other people, rather than being right.
Your kind of mental frame coming up in your life is so similar to mine. It's spooky. I mean, our family backgrounds are similar as well. Crazy. Some of your early stories.
Chopping wood.
Crazy stories. But yeah, I graduated bottom 20% of my class, 1.9 GPA, 1.8, something like that. GPA in high school, right? I had 18 jobs by the time I was 23 years old.
Jesus.
Right? Which is
Very talented.
hard to do. You know, you gotta get 18
It's like, I don't even know
jobs.
how you interview fast enough.
I know. Everything entry level in the world I did. And I got introduced to network marketing when I was 23 or 22, just about to turn 23. And a couple years in, I'm having a little bit of success, but I'm kind of trying to be in the right place at the right time. And I wasn't particularly good. And I'm looking for angles, and I'm looking for shortcuts, and I'm looking for, hacks to everything. And I'm hoping I can recruit a team that's going to be better than me, and before everybody figures out that I'm no good. And me and another gentleman were bouncing around the country looking for an additional product for a network marketing company. And we went to this place called the High Scope Educational Research Foundation in Ypsilanti, Michigan. And we sit down. They had an educational product for kids, educational philosophy. And we're going through this presentation, and this PhD comes in and he describes the philosophy. And the philosophy was 3 words: plan, do, review. He said, here's what we do with our kids every single day. We make a plan for the day. We do the plan for the day. At the end of the day, we review the plan, see what we did good, see what we didn't do so good, and we make a better plan for tomorrow. And we do that plan, and we repeat over and over and over again. And it was like one of those movie moments in my life where it's like an audible click in my head, and like everything faded out, you know what I mean? All I could see was that cycle. And I went, I can become world-class at anything doable for me with that philosophy. I don't need anything else. All I need is that. If I want to become good at recruiting, good at presentation, good at anything, I'll make a plan. I'll do that plan. I'll review it. And then I'll use the results, good or bad. Bad's actually better. Bad results is better than good results, to make a better plan the next time. So I learned in that process that there's no good experiences, no bad experiences, just learning experiences. But every experience helped me make a better plan. And by just improving a fraction of a percent a day, I outgrew everybody. I went from basically minimum wage to $1 million a year in 6 years.
Wow.
From nothing, and all with that philosophy. And Marina will tell you, we engage in it now. Here in our studio, every time we made a plan for this, we're going to do this, and we're going to review, and we'll make a better one tomorrow. Every event we plan to review. Every time we go to a restaurant, we'll plan to review. Did we like it? Did we not? Do we go back? Do we not? Was that a good? Everything is part of plan to review. And it was so liberating for me to realize I don't have to be a genius, because like you, I'm a slow learner. I have to circle things for a bit to be able to have it sink in. I have to approach it from different angles and let it sink in, maybe read it again and kind of get deep. But once I lock it in, I own that subject. At least in its raw form. I'll continue to plan to review it to find ways to get better with it. But it's so interesting. I would say the same thing to the audience is you don't have to be great right now. And I will tell you, you just apply, getting better every day, or my little structure that I learned from this High Scope Educational Research Foundation. We didn't use the product. We didn't, move forward with that project, but forever I'm grateful, because every skill that I've learned, every emotional management tool that I've been able to develop, everything with relationship, everything is all based upon that principle. Interesting, right?
It's very interesting. Lisa and I actually have a philosophy that we teach called the physics of progress, which is literally that, with a couple extra things called out. But it is that. I mean, it's
process.
Yeah, but it's literally that process.
Compound interest on your own growth.
Yeah, so when I broke down the physics of progress and presented it to the team, one of the team goes, "Oh, that's the scientific method." And I was like,
"That's a thing?"
Oh my God, that is the scientific method. And the fact that you've come upon the scientific method in a different context, I've come across it in a different context. The scientific method, obviously, its own thing. What is
the scientific method?
So it is plan, do, review. For real. So I'll walk you through with the extra steps. So what we call the physics of progress goes like this. And you're going to see the plan, do, review right in it. So you need to know what your goal is. So where are you trying to get to? You need to know what your obstacle is that stands between where you are and the goal you're trying to achieve. And then you're going to come up with a hypothesis. And the hypothesis is, what do I need to do? So the hypothesis is your plan. What do I need to do in order to overcome that obstacle and get where I want to go? And then you come up with a metric that you're going to judge success, right? So any hypothesis makes a prediction. If I do this, I expect this outcome. So you're going to come up with that metric. Then you're going to run the test. You're going to do the thing. And then you're going to review. And you're going to see, did we actually make the progress we expected to make? Yes or no? If no, why not? If yes, can we do it even faster? And then you come up with a new hypothesis. And it should be more informed. It should be better than the day before. And then you execute that plan. It's literally the reason that successful people, they're all going to have different words for it, but they are all going to come up with the same thing. And that's why we call it the physics of progress. There is nothing lower. There's nothing else. These are the laws. These are the way that it works. And this is why in this moment, I'm getting so emphatic about, hey, everybody, again, I have nothing but love. I'm the guy that wants to bring the two sides together and hold them, help them stay in tension. I'm not one of the guys out at the extremes. I'm the guy that's like, hey, both of these opinions are valid and they're valuable and we need that to exist. And all I want you to hear is that you can run these physics, this physics of progress setup, the plan, do, review setup. And the reason that everyone's going to have that same setup is there is nothing else. This is the only way to make progress. AI uses the same kind of stuff. I can run you through that. It's utterly fascinating. But it's this is first principles thinking about the problem. And so if you focus on what works, you're going to make progress. But to know if it's working or not, you have to know and say what your goal is. You have to know the metric and say your metric as to how you know that you achieved your goal. And if you do those, there's nowhere to hide when it's failing. And that's one of the classic mistakes that entrepreneurs make, certainly that the government makes now because they can paper their way out of it by printing money, is, oh, it didn't work. It actually didn't move us forward. That's okay, print, right?
Print more, yeah.
And so you'll see this a lot in businesses where if you can either raise money, and so you didn't have to find out, or you can rob Peter to pee Paul. So one side of your business, I mean, we have to evaluate this every day because we have one side that makes money and one side that doesn't. So it's like, well, are you on the right track or is this just the wrong thing? Right? So you have to be incredibly sober about that. But if I could just get everybody to believe it is the physics of progress. And so you can use it as quick as anybody else.
You know, it's funny. It was two things for me, actually. And ladies, sorry, we're monopolizing this conversation because
mansplain. Let's do it.
Yeah. Sorry. One was plan, do, review. That locked in, okay, a methodology, but I didn't have to what. It was only to ambition, to make money or whatever. And I was still mentally shortcutting what it needed to be towards. And I remember I went to a convention and everybody's celebrating. They're all up on stage and I'm not one of them on stage. And, I'm dealing with that emotionally. The night before I had watched an interview on CNN and they had some obscure expert on some topic I can't even remember, but I remember thinking, how does a person become expert at that? It's just like, what? Where do they find that person? Is there a book of these obscure experts that they bring in when they have a story about this thing? I found out later that they did, but nothing happened in that. The next day I'm sitting there and I'm watching people go across the stage and I'm not one of them. And I went, wait a minute. What if I let go of trying to be lucky, be in the right place at the right time, find the right partner, find the magical product, have the magical situation, get the support that I really crave, or get the recognition that I really want. What if I just let go of all that? And I just focus on becoming world-class. And I use plan to review to become an expert in my world, in the network marketing space. I just become so good, so amazing, talented, not just in my head, but in practice, that I have to be invited on that stage. They have to find, hope that I have the time because I'll be that good. So I literally, the dominating emotion in my body up until that moment, I'm sitting by myself, was fear that I wasn't enough, that I was in the wrong place, that I didn't have the right situation, didn't have the right support. And in that moment, in that decision, the fear left my body. I'm like, I have a process, plan to review. I have a direction, excellence. That's where I'm going to go. And I'll go find the people that are great at whatever it is I want to do. I'll find out what they do. Even if they don't want to tell me, I'll watch. I'll find out what they do and I'll engage, plan, do, review like a machine, like a grinding wheel. And I'll polish that up. I'll go find another one and I'll polish that up and I'll put them all together and it'll turn into a machine. It'll be amazing. And that's literally what happened. I had a very clear way to be able to go navigate in the world when I always kind of felt like an outsider up until that point, trying to fit in, trying to be part of the group. I didn't even care about that anymore. Like, no. I want to focus on this. And that path gave me all the freedom. It gave, it opened up all the doors. And it went from hard and painful and emotional to kind of simple. I'm not saying I didn't work hard, but I had ultimate confidence that I was going to surpass everybody. You know what I mean? Just because I saw that they weren't doing it. Most people, what I saw? They learned one skill or one little thing, and they just repeated that for like 30, 40 years. And they had enough to make a living. But they didn't apply plan to review to get better. So they capped themselves.
Yep.
It's crazy.
Well, to stay in that lane, Tom, I actually want to ask you a question because like after listening to some of your interviews, I was dying to ask this question here. So what, in your opinion, allows people to make different choices and decisions. I'll give you an example. So people coming, for example, from the same background. Lisa and I talked about it. Twins. I've seen examples of twins being raised in the same family, going through the same school, pretty much having the same circle of friends, pretty much same background, same setting when they were growing up and how they were brought up. Once faced with adversity, faced with challenges, with naysayer, with obstacles in their life, goes through the wall, finds the ability to learn, to execute, to face their fears, and go towards their dream. Another person uses the blame as their main metric. It's not my fault. How do you expect me to win? How do you expect me to? Because like it's easy kind of like to justify when people coming from different backgrounds, right? I'm coming from the communist countries. Like, how do you expect me to win? I was brought up in the world where the whole entrepreneurship was prohibited and it was never supported. It was never encouraged. And we did not have the tools to do that. So I could expect me to lose. And that would be justifiable. So, and somebody who was born in a capitalism environment, who had the tools and mindset and everything else, you would expect them to win. But when people are coming from exactly the same background, what is it? What forces or pushes somebody to execute and take charge and go towards their dreams, and somebody with the very same setting falls back? Is that something in our DNA? Is it something as one of the qualities is it something that you're born with, or it's something that you can develop? What is it?
Yes. Let's answer the hardest version of that. So let's take the identical twins who literally share their DNA. They grew up together, all of it, and yet they are still going to have dramatically different outcomes. So I find trying to explain to people how to optimize their own life, half of it's really boring to me, and then half is really interesting. But if you ignore the boring part, you'll miss out on literally half of what you're going to have to do. So first and foremost, yet another cancelable offense. I will just tell you this, that 50% of all of us is hardwired, period. So you're going to be what you're going to be. And 50% is malleable. So there are parts of you, and I'm sure you guys recognize it in yourself, and I'm sure you recognize it in your partner. There's just parts of them that no matter how much you punish them for acting in that way, you cannot get them to stop. And honestly, they probably can't get themselves to stop. That's the brain hardwiring. We all have our own personalities. Anybody that's raised boys and girls will tell you that it's a different game. So recognizing that in normal circumstances, there's just the hardwiring part is going to account for some of it. But with identical twins, now we're just dealing with the 50% that's malleable. But the problem is when we say that 50% is malleable, how deep are we talking? Because I'm talking about the gut. I'm talking, what's your gut health? What about your mitochondria? So this is the boring side, but it is not woo-woo. There's enough science on this to just drag anybody down for days into rabbit hole after rabbit hole. But the reality is that those twins stop being identical the second their microbiomes start diverging. So the first time one of them ate a different meal, divergent. The first time one of them ate the same meal, but while stressed, divergent. The first time one of them ate a meal right before going to bed.
A multiverse kind of concept, pairing off.
It is a billion sliding doors. A billion sliding doors. And not even just meals. One of them went into a house that had mold, and they took that in. Different friends, a girl broke their heart, and that had ramifications. So, but all of that is going to build up to something I call frame of reference. Your frame of reference is based on all the emotions that come from that biology. So there's a really great book by Lisa Feldman Barrett called How Emotions Are Made that really makes it clear. All the things you think you know about your emotions, something happened and I had an emotion. It doesn't work like that. So the way that emotions actually work is your body has a response. So when people think about intuition, what they really mean is their body. So your body gives you an emotion. Okay. Emotion is the language of your body, which is reading your subconscious is a better way to say it. Subconscious just collecting a ton of data from the body. So your subconscious can process data faster and vaster than your conscious mind. So let's say your conscious mind can hold 7 variables roughly. It's roughly actually real. So about 7 variables at any one time. Whereas the body is reading, I'm going to guess 10 times that, maybe more. Now, because the conscious mind can only process data so quickly, you have to have a method of getting the subconscious to speak to the conscious mind in a way that it can make very rapid decisions. Was that rustling in the bush a tiger or my friend? You don't have time to think through it. You have to feel through it. And boom, this feels wrong. Boom, you run, you have no idea. Oh, it ended up being the hose on the ground and not a snake, but better to react fast wrong than slow and right. So that becomes a big part of this equation. So you're trying to interpret your body's emotion by pulling it into the conscious mind and then giving it a label of some kind. But most people never take the time to do it. And they think that their emotion is quote unquote real or true. And so they just, I feel it, I act on it, and that's that. And so that alone is going to stop most people from having the life that they want. I've always said that success is predicated on your ability to overcome your emotions. So whether that's dealing with negative emotions and clearing your system of them, whether it's fear and acting, like Lisa wrote a whole book about, oh, just because you're afraid doesn't mean you don't keep moving forward, right? That was her understanding that my subconscious may be feeding me something, but I don't need to act on that. I can override that based on what my goals demand and continue to move forward. So you've got this frame of reference built on emotions, built on beliefs, built on values. So where'd you grow up? What'd your parents tell you was true? And so one of the biggest things, the reason Lisa and I launched Impact Theory was we encountered belief systems that were self-limiting with a lot of our employees at Quest because they'd grown up in the inner cities. And so just recognizing that you have this frame of reference built on all of those things, and you don't realize that it's a frame of reference. And you mistake all of those feelings and beliefs and values for objective truth. And so when someone doesn't value the things that you value or believe the things that you believe, you think that they're wrong, evil, the enemy, however you process that. But you certainly don't think, oh, I'm probably wrong too. And you just go in oh, that's stupid. Like, you leave your socks out. That's so dumb. And I use that example because I have to routinely remind my wife, and everyone that's listening to this is going to laugh because they fall on one side of the spectrum. To me, it isn't wrong to leave my socks on the floor. There's nothing wrong with that. And to be accused as if there was a problem, that it is objectively right to clean the floor. It's just not true. There is no objective right or wrong. Now you can negotiate it because you see, and guys fall into this.
I know. Yeah, I was like, what do you mean? Of course I'm objectively right.
Yeah. Now we're all laughing at this example. Right. We are all laughing at this example, but this is what answers your question.
This is what,
Everyone is trapped in a frame of reference. And the same way that people that hear this think, this guy, literally, I was with him, thought he was smart. Now I know he's an idiot. Because to think that socks on the floor is anything other than objectively wrong is just crazy. And so the thing I'm trying to get people to understand is, in that moment where you feel the most right, the most justified, you should be going, is there something I'm missing? And I'll give this example because it's ultimately the reason that some people, just to keep it really tight to the question, the reason that some people go on to do something with their lives and some people don't is because they have a frame of reference, the things they believe, the things they feel, the things that they value, all of it compels them to intentionally or unintentionally slip into the physics of progress. Remember, if you're going to succeed,
or
you
sabotage.
end up, that's the flip side of that coin. So you end up with a value system, with a frame of reference that either sabotages or puts you into the physics of progress. There's nothing else. Again, there's only what works and what doesn't work. The physics of progress is designed by evolution, physics, however you want to think about it, to help you on a path to figuring that out. And so people end up having these roadblocks. And I will say one that someone literally said to me, it's the person that I love and care about very much. But I was like, he was doing something really dumb in that it was moving his own life backwards. And I was like, you're super smart. Why are you doing that? And he said, oh, because my mom told me the world doesn't want people that look like me to succeed. And I was like, what the fuck does that matter? Like, A, that's the worst advice I've ever heard in my life because now it's causing you to hold yourself back. And B, even if it's true, you can get so good they can't stop you. So there are a billion people that have done something so extraordinary in the face of people actually trying to kill them for doing it. So I'm like, Just that doesn't make any sense. And that was the first time I realized, oh my God, they're trapped inside of a worldview that doesn't get them into the physics of progress. And so it's what I call the only belief that matters. The only belief that matters. I don't care what else you believe. The only belief that matters is if I put time and energy into getting better at this thing, I will actually get better. If you believe that, your life will go in one direction. And if you don't, it will go in the exact opposite.
The one, I want to comment a couple things on this topic. One is the idea of having enough awareness and emotional intelligence to admit that you probably don't know everything, or that you certainly don't know everything. Somebody taught me, don't believe everything you believe.
That is very good advice.
Because how many times have you had a belief in the past that turned out not to be the belief that you have now? So if you hold on to them so tightly and you're not willing to have awareness to listen to another point of view, you can trap yourself inside a little bubble. And to Marina's question about what makes people different, I've always kind of viewed this as you judge a life by the number of experiences that you have and the intensity of those experiences and where those experiences take you, right? The decisions you make based upon those experiences. And I've always, not always, but for the last 30 years, I have paid very close attention to what I call defining moments in your life, where you're faced with a situation, or you're told something that makes you mad, and you have a choice to turn right or left, to say yes or no. And you don't know in that moment how big that decision is, to fight or run away, to stand up for yourself or to apologize for yourself, right? You have millions of experiences, but then there's the defining ones, where when you decided to be an entrepreneur instead of an employee, when you decided to get into the relationship, with the love of your life, despite not everything being perfect. I remember with Marina and I, we met when I was speaking at an event in Moscow, and she was looking to be country manager for Ukraine, and her sister, who you just met, was translating on stage, and she came to translate backstage, right? And I was, a dead duck as soon as I was hanging out with her for a couple of days. But I had made this decision that I had this list, single at the time, right? I had this list of qualities and criteria and everything else. And she lived in Ukraine and I lived in Minnesota. And that sounded complicated. And it wasn't, and I talked with a friend, and a friend gave me this advice. He said, nobody's going to get through your list ever. Just so you understand, as a grown adult, pick 6 things that are non-negotiable and be flexible on everything else. And the geography wasn't on my list. I'm like, because I was like, I really like you, but this might be hard, language and kids and, other side of the world, and 24 hours to visit. And this wasn't in my plan, but it wasn't on my list. So I let go. That was a defining moment to be able to say, okay, I'm going to just see where this takes me, change my whole life. Right. So I think some of these people, like these twins, whatever, somebody gets pushed down in the schoolyard and decides to never stand up again. And somebody else gets pushed down in the schoolyard and decides nobody else is going to push them down again. Mm-hmm. And the mystery is, where does that decision come from in that moment? I just don't even know where it comes from. I think we need to try and have better decisions consistently, to hope that we land on the right one. But to bring Lisa into the conversation, I want to ask you, as I'm describing defining moments, mm-hmm. in your entrepreneurial journey, in your as an author, with your podcast, with your business, running your teams, you've had to have lots of defining moments.
Yeah, I actually, if you don't mind, I'd love to talk about the relationship,
Sure.
the checklist, because that also was actually a defining moment for me when I
Really?
went out on a date with Tom, because obviously it changed my life. But having that list of like the checks, like I thought I wanted a guy that had this. I thought I actually want. So it's amazing that list didn't hold you back, but I actually found that my list would have held me back if I stuck to it, because my list would have been a guy.
How long was it?
I
How
didn't
many
re-
things do you think?
So here's the
Real
thing. I didn't
life.
actually write it down, but when I thought, what was the guy that I wanted to date? So I was
Mm-hmm.
21. So let's just put that into perspective. I was 21, and I thought if a guy had a nice car, it meant that he was, he worked hard, which
He had
means that
his
he could
shit together.
provide. I'm not actually thinking through this, right? 21, I don't actually think it's the providing, but he's got your shit together, exactly. And I thought, okay, if he takes me to a nice restaurant, right? Like all of these things meant something. Now that was what I was brought up to believe would be a good husband to then marry. So Tom, to got a very long story short, I come to America for 2 months at film school. I walk in, it's a film school for adults, but I walk in and he's my teacher. So he doesn't ask me on a date. So after the first month of schooling, we then go on a date. I thought, if you go to my list, right? Okay, he looks like he's put together, like he has a good job, he dresses well, and he picks me up and I open the door and I've spent 2 hours getting ready, right? The hair, the makeup, all the things. And he opens the door and he's literally come from work in his sweaty t-shirt, and it's a New York Film Academy t-shirt. So it was a work t-shirt as well. It's like, okay, not used to this. Normally the guy like goes home, showers, puts on a lot of cologne.
I do want to remind people, as a teacher, not a football instructor, so it was not like covered in sweat here.
No, but still, I was used to like
From a
over
girl's
the top.
perspective, you were covered in sweat.
Thank you.
Apparently.
Yes, exactly. So he comes, and then we walk to his car, and he's got this really big, old, beefy Buick that's like extremely old. The door's broken. The back seat is full of his trash, basically. And I've got the idea of, hang on a minute, this guy isn't put together. So that said something about him, right? In my head. And then he opened the car door. I was 21. I'd never been on one date where the guy opened a door for me. Not once. And so in that moment, I was like, what is this? Like chivalry's actually, like it actually exists. And then he takes me.
You forgot the back seat for a moment.
Thank you. I forgot the back seat for the moment. Mm-hmm. And then we get to a restaurant, and he pulls up, and it's a strip mall with a Chinese restaurant in a strip mall with a B rating. Now, at the time, being from England, I didn't know what B rating was, but I was used to very much nice restaurants. And he was so nonchalant about it. He was like, oh, I love the food here. And so we walk in, and he's just so himself. He's charming. He's funny. He's asking me questions that no one's ever asked me. Why do you believe in God? He tells me he watches porn. Like the things that you don't necessarily think that so you're going to talk about on the first date. And I was fascinated.
And you forgot the restaurant.
I forgot the complete restaurant because he was funny. He was engaging. He asked me my hobbies and he was interested. So if you asked me what my list of a perfect partner would have been, I never would have put these things down.
First date was the porn conversation?
Yes.
That day, I would kill to be a fly on the wall and like watch that again.
To rewatch that?
Yeah.
The reaction.
It was electric. It was electric. And when we met, literally after that date, I mean, never look sideways at another human being ever again. It just was incredible.
Yeah. So anyone listening, whoever puts down a list of this is the business I want to build, this is the partner I want, this is the life I want.
Flexible.
It's amazing to put it down, to have a goal, to have a vision of what you want to look for, but be flexible. And in that moment, I was like, this is really interesting. This is intriguing. And then after I was like, I can't believe that was like, if I go back to my, quote unquote list, I can't believe that's what I was looking for because it wasn't what I wanted. In the end. And that wasn't, so allowing yourself to be flexible, to, pivot. And then in that moment, that was a defining moment, obviously, because I went on the date with him. I didn't dismiss him. And that became that one night of like, this guy is so fascinating. I want to go on another date with him. And we literally, the next date, let's go on a date. The next date, let's go on a date. The next date. And I was, going back to England, I thought this was going to be a hot American guy that I was going to have this, summer fling with, and I'll never see again. It'll be a great story that I tell my grandkids when I'm 90. And because he had been in a relationship where she was a little obsessive, he was like, this is fantastic. She has to legally leave the country. so both of us went into that one date without the expectation that it was going to go any further. And that's what allowed us to be ourselves. That's what allowed him to just be so honest about God and porn and ask me these questions. And I'd never been questioned that in a very authentic way, right? He wasn't judging. And so all of these things put together, and we just enjoyed each other's company. By the time I was ready to leave, we were like, oh my God, like this is something special. And in that was like obviously the biggest defining moment of my life. Because
but the little micro moments, right? The door, the door opening up, the radical authenticity, asking questions, those different types of things. And Marina will tell you. Yeah. Go ahead.
No.
No, I mean, I showed up at a dinner, and they were all there. All the big wigs were there. And as a joke, I got a big furry Russian hat, the big black furry Russian hat. And I had this Burberry trench coat. So I walk in with American with jeans, a big Russian hat, which is not funny to, it's so dumb and touristy, and she watches me come in, and she looks like $1 trillion, and I'm walking in with this thing laughing. And the fact that she got beyond that as a first impression was a miracle. But anyway, what were you going to say?
That's hilarious.
No, what I wanted to say is it's so fascinating, how we create a box for ourselves, right? That we trying to fit in with, like, this is the guy that I want to date, and he needs to have this and this and this and this qualities. And that was kind of like, for me, one of the kind of like aha moments as well, because like, growing up, we all heard these fairy tales like, oh, he needs to be a prince on a white horse, blue eye, blonde hair, and all that stuff. And when you go through life, you start realizing like, blue eyes and blonde hair is not necessarily what's going to make me happy. Having a man who understands me, supports me, loves me for who I am, with all of my weirdnesses, with all of my imperfections, and allows me to be who I am and loves me in that way and helps me to get better. That's the man that I want to be with. But it takes time to realize that. It takes time to kind of like understand that. So I think that faster we realize that we don't want to fit into the box that society or the governments or the culture is building for us, and faster we build our own version of our life and what makes us happy and what makes us, better human beings. I think that's going to be an easier way for a lot of people to find joy and happiness in life, because my version of happiness might be something crazy for somebody else. And there's like, absolutely, this is a horror movie for me, but that makes me happy. And that's what I'm striving for. So I want to kind of like continue the conversation with Lisa and bring guys into this box, right? So Lisa and I talked about it, and I asked her permission to go into that conversation. You guys decided not to have kids, right? When you grew up in a family and when you're going to be a mother, and when you're going to be kids, when you're going to have kids, and this is the home that I'm going to raise my kids in. And then at some point in your life, you realize that this is not necessarily fitting the box that Lisa wants, right? Or what Tom wants. So talk to me about it. Like, first of all, realizing that it's something that like your family was really excited about you guys having kids. And then when you realize that it's not something that you guys really want, first of all, how that decision was made, how hard was it? Because I know a lot of people who probably watching it right now who potentially feeling the same way and thinking it's like, oh, I'm getting old, my clock is ticking, and if I'm not going to have kids tomorrow, I need to find the guy that I need to have kids, or whatever it might be, putting all that pressure on themselves, and then kind of like realizing, but maybe I don't really want kids. So how that decision was
frame of reference again. How did you come up with your frame of reference on it?
How did you come up with that? And
with all the pressures in the world.
How, like, I'm sure it kind of like it was emotionally challenging, but talk to that.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was put in the box of you're going to get married, you're going to have kids after a year. Like literally, if you go to any Greek person back in the day, that was exactly it. You get married around 21, 22, and then after a year, you have kids. That was almost the pattern. So I didn't even question it. And so I remember when Tom and I were getting married and we were talking about kids, I'm like, okay, so babe, basically in the year. And he looks at me and he's like, say what? And I was like, well, we're going to have kids in the year, right? And he's like, babe, I married you because I wanted to be with you for a while, not because I didn't marry you to then have kids. Like, sure, they're going to come, but I want to enjoy my wife. So that was the first, I was like, obviously that's very romantic as well. So how can you kind of argue with that? And I was like, oh, you mean we can, yeah, I guess we can wait. Like, why did I think we had to have it in the first year anyway, right? So that was like the first thing of just breaking my idea of what a marriage was going to look like. And then over time, it became, okay, so what do you want in life? And so each year it was, okay, are we ready? Now, I'm sure anyone listening that has kids, they're like, if you wait till you're ready, you'll never have them. So I totally get that. But I married someone extremely ambitious. And the thing that I swore to, just because I have a ring on my finger doesn't change that. So as we were trying to build enough wealth so we can make movies, Tom was like, babe, I'm not ready yet. I'm too ambitious. I'm going out. I'm not home all the time. We're gambling with with every penny that we have. Like, we're going out and chasing that dream. And so I'm not going to be home at 6 p.m. every night. And that was also another reminder of, I fell in love with someone. I'm attracted to his ambition. That is a plus. That was an attribute that made me want to marry him. So just because I have a ring doesn't mean that now that changes. And so I have to honor the man that I married, not just now, but I have to honor that for the rest of my life. And so that became a very clear indicator as well of, so I think actually, even if we have kids, the dynamic is going to be different. It's not going to be the traditional man comes home back then, traditional man comes home at 6 p.m., dinner's on the table. He'd already said that isn't going to be the life he wants. So for me to ask him to be anything else is me robbing him of who he is.
Was it ultimately a sacrifice, or was it a joint decision?
Well, so that was him just saying, when we're ready, I just want you to know, when we're ready, I'm still not going to be coming home. So I was like, I totally respect that. Now then, flash forward to, we're not ready, we're building, he's out, entrepreneur. I was holding on at home, stay-at-home wife for 8 years. Quest starts, I jump in to help. As I jumped in to help, and it grew so quickly, it became a moment of, I no longer have to help. The company was doing well, it had enough revenue that we could hire someone for me to now step back. In that moment, it was the decision almost of, do I hire someone to now come underneath me, and now I'm a leader, and now this is part of what I do every day, and now I'm part of the company? Or do I replace me? And I loved what I did. I found joy in waking up every day, in learning something new, in finding an obstacle, and then figuring it out. I felt so good about that. And over time, I realized I tried to do everything. In fact, let's stop there. I definitely tried to do both. I've got to put the food out for my husband. I've got to cook. I've got to clean his clothes. I've got to work. And then I realized I was miserable. So that became the moment where I sat down with Tom and I was like, I actually love this. I love this so much. And I was like, I love you, babe, but I don't want to cook for you anymore. And I don't want to clean for you anymore. And that has no reflection of how I feel about you, but it isn't bringing me joy. And now let's talk about what that looks like with children and everything. And he was so gracious. He said, what kind of husband would I be to ask my wife to give up something that makes her so happy? But we now have to communicate and navigate what this means as a partnership, what this means as our dynamic. And again, no right or wrong, but what do we both want, and what are we both comfortable with? So he was very honest and said, look, if we want to have children, then you have to know I'm still not going to be home at 6, 7 p.m. So I then did what I call, what's an average Wednesday look like? Mm-hmm. And I just looked at the realities of the buckets that I was in, or the buckets that I could choose to be in. So on an average Wednesday, if I worked and had kids, what would an average Wednesday look like? Do I like that idea? Because Tom's already told me he's not coming home to feed the kids dinner. I can only respect that. And some people may freak out. What do you mean the guy doesn't want to come home and feed the kids? What do you mean the guy doesn't want to wake up in the middle of the night and, and feed the kid? He was very honest, babe. For me to be who I want to be, for me to be able to be ambitious and come home and be loving towards my family, I have to be driven. You have to let me do this. And so I can't wake up in the middle of the night, because I understand, the power of the energy. You can't disturb your sleep. So he's like, I'm not going to be waking up in the middle of the night. And for me, that was refreshing that we could be honest with each other, because then I could play this game on an average Wednesday. If he's not around, do I want to get up in the middle of the night, feed the child? Do I want them?
And let me be clear. I was like, we can get a night nurse, whatever. It's not like it had to be all you taking care of.
Right.
Right. But even at the time, it wasn't like we had a bunch of money. So, we would try and figure it out. But I needed him to be honest with me. And so it was, do I want to wake up in the middle of the night and then get up in the next morning and go to work and enjoy my work and then come home? Do I want to, I would want to put my child first.
Mm-hmm.
And so in those buckets of being a working mother is very possible. There are amazing women out. Sarah Blakely has 4 children and built a $1 billion company.
Yeah.
So it's possible. Is that the life I want? Talking about the buckets. Take yourself out of the bucket of what I should do, what other people. Oh, it's possible. Yes, it's possible. But do I want that on an average Wednesday? And the answer was no.
Frame of reference, it's interesting because most people just skip all this conversation, just get pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
Seriously. And then just kind of like, well, I guess we're pregnant now. So, they're just taken on this magic carpet ride.
And I saw a lot of women that got upset with their partners, especially when their partners were ambitious, that he wasn't doing his, part of the half of the share of the kid. And it's like, I understand that, but did you have a conversation beforehand?
Yeah.
Right.
Because that's it. It's like, have the conversation beforehand, be upfront about what you're willing and not willing to do. And that isn't a slight on the child. That isn't a slight on your partner. You need to give space to your partner to be that honest. And so in that honesty, I could then process all the buckets of being either doing both or either giving up my career and being a stay-at-home wife or deciding not to have children. Those were the 3 buckets that I have a right to look at and choose. And so in all of that, I loved what I do. I love it. I love being in business. I love being around other powerful women. I love growing. I love going, I have no idea what I'm doing. And put in the reps to then be so damn good that no one can ignore you. I love that. And so once I started to feel the fire of it, it became an easier decision to then say, I don't want children. Obviously, we then spoke about it and then he decided the same and we came to that conclusion. But it became so much about we had to communicate, even by going from the stay-at-home wife to being his business partner. That communication piece took us months and months and months because he was very honest again. He's like, while I want to see you happy, babe, what guy wouldn't want his food cooked for him, his, clothes put out? So what we have to do is you have to let me grieve. And that was, I completely understood that because he had to grieve. The wife, I was stopping being, right? Because I wasn't putting clothes out for him anymore.
Such interesting language.
And I had to grieve the woman I thought I was going to become. And within that, we said, what does that grieving process look like? And it has to be slow. It has to be, you have to give each other respect. You have to give each other space to be honest. And so in order to help him grieve that wife, I had to respect it because I really do. It's like, if you go back and say, what do you mean? I'm this woman now and you've just got to accept it. Well, does that help the relationship? No. Does that show respect? I'm changing. I am changing and I know that. So I have to be respectful in showing that change. So the grieving process looked like I went to cooking and cleaning 7 days a week, to then the next week I was cooking, cleaning 6 days a week. And then the week after that, it was 5 days a week. The week after that, it was 4 days a week. And then we came to the point where he was like, oh, babe, if you don't do the laundry for 3 weeks, it's fine. I'll just go commando. And it literally went to one day, I hadn't done the laundry because I was so busy focused on my ambition and my work. He didn't complain about it because we'd communicated to it. And he literally one day didn't have underwear. And he's like, all right, babe, I'm going to work commando, bye. And I was like, that's my hubby. And that's how you go from taking a really hard thing that could have broken our relationship to us navigating it, to him joking that he had no underwear and being proud that he was supporting me. And when people say to me, you're so lucky that you had a husband that supported you, that you chose not to have children. Or you're so lucky that, to Tom, you have a wife that just, doesn't mind you being risk happy. And it has nothing to do with luck. It has to do with us communicating every step of the way, whether we're changing, whether we're growing, articulating that, giving each other space to be honest, and then coming up with a game plan together to move forward together.
You know what we did? It was so interesting. And this is not at all where I thought we were going to go with this conversation, but it's all awesome. Because I think just rich real talk like we were talking around dinner, same exact kind of conversation. Marina and I had a big breakthrough in what we encourage couples to do, which you did in your way, we did in our way, is design your life. Literally, like a business plan. Design your life. What do you want it to look like? With kids, no kids, how do you want to live? The way we built our life is we created a support system to do the things that we didn't enjoy doing. And so we could free ourselves up to do what we were meant to do. So like the laundry, like groceries, like putting gas in the car, or there's support systems for all of that. And people can call us bougie and they can call us whatever they want. But I had a couple different billionaires tell me the same thing. Find the thing that you're meant to do, that is the highest return, what you're put on this earth to do. Figure out what that is worth on an hourly basis. Anything under that hourly basis that could be done by someone else, emotionally and tactically, have it be done by somebody else. And I took that to heart, and I decided I don't do any of those things. My siblings and my parents are just like, he's useless. Yeah, I'm useless at those things. I'm not. I do not have a tool. I don't have a screwdriver. I'm just going to call somebody to fix that thing. I don't get a sense of pride in patching a hole in the wall. I'm just not going to do that. The laundry's taken care of, and there's always gas in the car, and somebody changes the oil, and there's groceries in the refrigerator, and I don't think about those things. That's all managed, and she manages those things as well. But we decided to our support system, our purpose, and then where we're going to spend our time, vacations and hobbies and fun, and where we were going to do that. We were going to do some together, do some on our own, different things that we literally would map out how we were going to spend our time and live our life. That we've done that probably 5 times?
I mean, yeah, because throughout life, we accomplish certain
years.
Things. So now goals and dreams a little bit different, and we growing, we changing, we kind of have a new.
If things get a little out of whack, we'll take a couple days, have a staycation somewhere, and we'll just map it all out again. Okay, this is feeling a little off, and communicate and map it all out. But I think you're going to live a life one way or the other. It's better if you design it, or somebody else design it for you. You know what I mean?
And with that, it's just I wish people had this kind of a conversation before they have kids or before they get married, so they get to know each other. But the question is, in order to have these kind of conversations, we need to get to the level of trust, right? That we can open up and be vulnerable with our insecurities and with our, fears and things that we thought our life going to look like. And now we don't think this way. So we don't look like a liar to our partner because oh yeah, I signed up for, this, and now all of a sudden you're changing on me. So all of that is just how do you get to that level of trust and respect way early in your relationship, so you can have those kind of conversations before it's kind of too late. Because for Eric and myself, I feel like it took us about 3 years to get to that level of trust, because we're coming from different marriages, we're coming previous relationships, we're coming from different cultures, we're coming from so many differences that it just took us some time. Because in his previous relationship, being open and being truthful was not necessarily rewarded. He was punished. And because of that, he would withhold this information, and he would not necessarily say babe, this bothers me or whatever. And in my kind of previous life, it would this would mean fight. This would mean drama. This would mean something, or just respect. And it would start on that kind of on the wrong foot. So getting into kind of okay, talk to me. Let's have this conversation. Let's get into that kind of into that base level of truth, and be open enough and be okay to be vulnerable. I think especially for men, it's so hard to get to that level of trust that because they're meant to be, and the world is constantly
frame of reference, be a man,
right. The world is constantly you have to be tough, you have to be the man of the family, you have to earn the money. You have to. And when they feel lost, or when men feel, not necessarily being a provider or creating that security and safety net for their family, they feel emotionally, scared to share that with their spouses. So how do you do that? Do you guys have the answer for that?
So I can actually, yeah. So at least for us, I think of relationships like a tennis match, right? You got a choice. Are you playing singles or are you playing doubles? Think about singles. You're on one side of the net, the other person's the other. You hit the ball back and forward. Only one person can win. You see a lot of relationships that are literally like that. We've decided we're playing a game of doubles. We win together, we lose together. If I've got a weak backhand, my hubby's got my back. If he's got a weak front hand, whatever you call it, right, I've got his back. But you don't look at their weakness as a like, oh, well, I'm going to use that against them now. You look at their weakness and say, oh, you're weak here, I've got you. And so with vulnerability, I think that's super important to then say, hey, when you're vulnerable, I'm not going to use it against you because we're both in the same relationship. We've got the same goal. And so if we agree that vulnerability, communication, 1,000% honesty is what we need to win this match together, then you just agree to that. And once you agree to it, then when someone's vulnerable, when someone's saying something that you don't like, when someone's saying something very honest that you don't like, you go back to that original agreement that you made. Oh, this is a game of doubles. Okay, he's saying he doesn't like something. This isn't a dig about me. I just need to be open to hearing it. This isn't I shut down now and he's being mean. There's honesty behind that. And once you build the foundation of that trust and honesty, then you can have the really hard conversations and you can communicate through them. But if you don't have that, when someone comes to you and is very honest and they say the hard thing about something you're doing or about your relationship, you're going to shut down. So it all comes to that very first agreement of what your relationship is, what it's built on, and then hopefully that gives you the space.
And one other thing that I think is great, and we'll kind of wrap with this because I know we got some time sensitivity here. I was listening to a podcast that you did, Tom, and we're going to put links to all the books and all the podcasts, Lisa's and Tom's, and everything that they've recommended inside of the show notes for today's show. But the scientist, what was his name?
Ooh, I've had many.
The one we were talking about in the car.
Real.
The quantum guy.
Yes, you're talking about Donald Hoffman.
Donald Hoffman. And I listened to him say something over and over and over, and then you just champion it. And what he was saying over and over and over is he devoted his entire life to this particular topic, maybe more than anybody else in the world. But he constantly said, I might be wrong. I might be wrong. I'm probably wrong. Over and over and over again, after just enormous amounts of time and a frame of reference that he had developed, right? And you said, thank you so much for saying that, because so many people are not willing to admit that they might be wrong. And I think in relationships, in business, in how we look at the world, if we can all at least have that frame of reference, if that can be a core frame of reference, that with all of this, we might be wrong. We might be missing a piece. We might be still needing to plan to review and learn something that we haven't learned yet. The penny we thought maybe has dropped, but maybe it didn't yet. I think if we can be in that space where we're all not too proud to admit that we might be wrong about some belief that we were raised with, then I think we have the ability to connect in a more meaningful way and to change and to get better.
Agreed. Agreed. It's so on the money.
Yeah. Well, thank you both for spending your time.
Thanks for having us.
I haven't touched 5% of the topics I wanted to get into, which is a good sign that there is rich soil for other conversations in the future. But thank you to both of you. I'm super grateful for your friendship, super grateful for the value, and I know our audience is going to be grateful as well.
Thanks for having us. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you, guys.
Love you, Marina.
Oh, I love you too.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Tom and Lisa Bilyeu. They're very, very smart people, and I can't wait to have them back and continue the conversation. If you got value, make sure you subscribe and share this with a friend. Until next time, go out there and make your life amazing.